a huge music fan. All I do is listen to music no matter what I'm doing. I usually have music in the background. So then sometimes when I'm listening to music, I'll look at my artist that I'm listening to and I like to read their backstory and see what they're like. And a lot of them actually, since I primarily listen to indie music, has a lot of them have allegations or actual confirmed assaults on minors. And I ask myself, why? Why on earth do all of these people have such bad reputations and people just still let it go on? The reason they still can go and have a successful music career is because they're famous. The fame is what basically gives them armor. Hollywood reinforces it by not having any consequences for them. And if there are consequences, it's very minimal. And even in the indie music scene, there'll be people who are just saying, oh, that's not true, just because they don't want their favorite musician to have such allegations. Or also people will just say that it's not that bad. Or, oh, she was 17, she was almost 18 anyways. Things like that. And it's that mentality is what hurts all the teenage girls who usually are the primary victims of musicians. That's why, in my opinion, all of these primarily men musicians get away with all of this just because there's no accountability. And if there's no accountability, why would you ever stop doing something that you think that you can get away with? My first example is Mr. Kitty. He was a famous artist, or up and coming actually, who made a song called After Dark, and it's like a more gothic, dark wave tone. And a lot of girls found that song to be really good. And so then he became very popular among women. And he then exploited this by texting an underage girl. She then came out and told everybody about what happened. And he simply just said, sorry guys, my bad. And that was it. I've heard literally nothing else about him being canceled or holding him accountable. And why? There was genuine evidence as to that he did that and that he made that girl uncomfortable and made her send pictures of her body even though she was not of age. But it doesn't matter because nobody's going to hold him accountable for it. And why would they if nobody else is doing it? You don't want to be the one person who has a problem with somebody while everybody else is fine with it. You don't want to be the odd man out. And also the fact that even though these men are admitting to it, there's also a possibility that they don't admit to it and they say that it's false, and people might just prefer the musician's word over the actual victim. Just because who are they to say, oh, I don't know this random girl who said that they've been abused. I trust more of this famous actor or this famous musician. So my second example and my primary example for this is the guitarist from All Time Low. Alex Gaskarth has been in All Time Low for a very long time. They're more of a 2000s emo band, and they have a large female following as well. Alex Gaskarth just went on Rolling Stone, and he said, and I quote, "The allegations are completely and utterly false." And that was pretty much the whole article. They just said, oh, what was said, and he said it's false, so really, who should we believe? And that was the whole article, basically. And it made you doubt that the girl, who we should always believe first until proven wrong, is a victim. And we don't want to admit that, because then that means that we would have to either hold him accountable by taking him into jail or not support him, because you don't want to support somebody who abuses power like that. But it's easier if we just say, oh, that didn't happen. And we don't hold people accountable. And for what? There's nothing wrong with holding people accountable for doing bad things. There's a saying of hurt people hurt people. And with my example, that's Drake Bell. He was abused as a child when he was in Nickelodeon by one of his producers. He then went on later in life to text a minor sexually explicit messages, and he knew her well, so he was also abusing two types of power. Knowing her from her childhood and also, oh, I'm famous. Don't you want to talk to me? Don't you want to give me what I want? That way you have a possibility of being well-liked or also being famous. If Hollywood had cracked down on the abuse that's in their system, then that man would not have hurt another girl or another person. He might not have even been hurt, but the abuse in Hollywood's been going on for ages, and nobody does anything about it because it's not really brought to light that much. But I believe that it should be, because then that way there's not an overwhelming cycle of people hurting more people and more people and more people. Even if we did hold people accountable, there is another issue, and that's just not listening to the victims. When child stars who have been abused speak out, they're often met with silence, and that's not a good thing. These little girls or little boys have no support system, even though they're told they do. People are told to speak out, but when they do and people don't like what they have to say, they're usually met with silence, and that's not okay. And then when these people aren't held with accountability, they just continue to with their life and like nothing happened. Even in most extreme cases, when they do have a red notice or somebody says, "Oh, they need to go to jail," they could flee the country and nobody does anything about it. My main example is Roman Polanski. He's a Polish French film director, and he had a charge of the rape of a 13-year-old girl. And what he decided to do was flee the country. He still produces movies, he still gets money from his movies, but nobody does anything. And then the girl who was abused by him, she has no vengeance, no payback for what happened to her. And she has to live her life with knowing that his movies are out there and she could go see them on accident and she would just be met with devastating news because her abuser is out there and nobody acts like it's a problem. There are articles that do talk about how these people have hurt other people. One of them, the New Zealand Herald, does talk about how Roman Polanski definitely abused and sexually assaulted this little girl. They also talk about Woody Allen, who also has very serious charges on him. They want everybody to know that yes, these people are being abused, but it's not a large topic usually. Most people like to think, oh, what's Britney Spears' favorite color? Nobody wants to talk about that industry is just hurting people. And when they do talk about it, it's very small, and it's not usually a large conversation. And why? Why do people not want these people to get the payback that they deserve? You're not hurting anybody if you are explaining that people need to stop being watched or stop being heard. You are hurting someone when you support an abuser. Thankfully, there have been a lot more people who want to hold these people accountable. Obviously, not as much as needed since I'm making such a statement about this, but there are people who want others to have consequences for their actions, to understand that what they do hurts other people and it's not just something that they can do. I've asked people on Google Forms before, on my Instagram, how they felt, on if they stopped listening to musicians, and some of them did, but not all of them, because they don't realize that if you're supporting these other people, you're hurting the victims. But why should you have to be the one who holds this musician accountable? Why can't it be Hollywood? Why can't it be the record label? And nobody seems to want to do that. They either want to stop listening to this person completely, which is a great step forward, but it's not the solution. There needs to be legal change on figuring out if these children are being hurt, how these children are being hurt, and how can they solve. ISIS cracked down recently, actually. There was a Bloomingdale artist from Illinois, and they gave him, I think, a minimum 5 years because he was texting multiple little girls. And they had actually booked him. But he was a lower influence artist. He had, I think, about 10,000 followers. Nobody's yet to go for the big artists unless there's this huge amount of evidence. Of course, P. Diddy, he went to jail 100%, but there was so much evidence. These small-time artists that I'm talking about are not small-time, but smaller artists, such as Part-Time or Buttertones or Swimmers, any part of the indie music scene, they don't have any consequences. There will be articles, like there's SAC Media, they have an article about all of these people who have abused their power. But again, none of them are in jail. I can easily go to an actual concert with these people, but nobody does anything to book them. And it's because they have a good amount of influence. And what we need to do is we need to take away the quote unquote power that they think they have. Instead, we need to take these people to jail so they can understand they're not invincible. They cannot get away with this. And I think that if we did that, we could genuinely stop the abuse that happens in Hollywood and just in the music scene in general.